Subscribe to my channel for more powerful real-life stories like this one. I never imagined marriage would feel like this. I used to believe that after a long day, after the laughter, the disagreements, and the exhaustion, we'd naturally grow closer. But sometimes, fatigue doesn't just settle in your body. It seeps into your heart, into the very space where love is meant to live. My name is James. I'm 38 years old and I've been married to Claire for 12 years. When we first met, she was radiant, full of life, the kind of woman who could light up an entire room with just her smile. I, on the other hand, was quiet and steady. We seemed to balance each other perfectly, or at least I thought we did. In those early years, our connection felt unbreakable. We'd cook together, take unplanned road trips, and send each other playful messages during work. There was laughter, touch, warmth. I remember drifting to sleep on the couch as she softly hummed beside me. Life had rhythm, harmony, a sense of partnership where both of us tried to keep the spark alive. But somewhere around year 7, the cracks started to show. Claire began to grow distant, not just physically but emotionally too. It wasn't hostility. She wasn't angry or cruel. She simply pulled away. The little gestures that once meant everything to her became meaningless. A kiss on the cheek earned a shrug. A hug barely lasted a second. Conversations lost their soul. Words exchanged without feeling. Like we were housemates instead of partners. I blamed it on life's chaos, the job, the bills, the exhaustion of raising our son. I told myself she was tired or overwhelmed, but it was more than that. Slowly, a wall began to form between us, silent, invisible, yet unyielding. I tried to reach her in ways I thought might matter. Leaving notes in her purse, surprising her with her favorite meal, planning a quiet weekend away. Nothing worked. The more I tried, the further she drifted. And then came the words that shattered me. I'm tired. Don't touch me. The first time she said it, I froze. Simple words, yet they hit like thunder. I remember standing there, arms half extended, trying to bridge the distance, and she stepped back. Not in anger, not even resentment, but pure indifference. That moment changed something inside me. For weeks, I replayed it in my head, asking myself what I had done wrong, wondering if I had somehow failed the marriage I'd fought to preserve. Still, I held on. I told myself patience and understanding would heal the distance. I did everything a husband should. Paid the bills, helped our son with homework, made dinner, listened when she spoke. But I couldn't cook love back into her heart. I couldn't spark affection where it had died out. Every attempt at closeness met rejection. And each rejection chipped away at the man I once was. One night stands out clearly, the night that began to change everything. Our son was asleep upstairs. The house was quiet, the only sound the low hum of the fridge. I reached across the dinner table, brushed her hand, hoping to find even a flicker of connection. She looked at me with empty eyes and said softly, "Don't. Just don't." That was the moment everything became clear. It wasn't about stress or fatigue. She simply didn't want me anymore. Surprisingly, I didn't feel anger. I just felt the hollow ache of recognition. The painful truth that I had been giving endlessly, mistaking endurance for love. But love without reciprocity is just survival. In the following days, silence filled the house like fog. I watched her, noticing not what she did, but what she no longer did. The absence of affection, the emptiness of her presence. It hit me then. A marriage without intimacy isn't really a marriage. It's two people sharing a space but living separate lives. And in that emptiness, I realized I had been losing myself. So I changed. I stopped chasing. I stopped forcing smiles and hugs that weren't wanted. Instead, I turned inward, focusing on my own peace, my own identity. For the first time in years, I made choices that were just mine. And strangely, that brought me calm. Quiet, steady calm. Claire noticed. Of course she did. I wasn't available on command anymore. I stopped reshaping my life around her moods. I became consistent in my independence. A version of myself she had long forgotten. Her reactions shifted, from confusion to irritation to shock. But her rejection no longer held power over me. I wasn't asking for affection anymore. I was demanding respect. And if she couldn't offer that, I decided it wasn't my burden to fix. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't playing games. I simply changed the energy. When she reached for me and I stepped back, the silence said everything. For years, I had confused love with constant sacrifice, with bending myself around someone else's disinterest. That night I learned something fundamental. Love is shared, respect is essential, and without both, everything else is hollow. The first time I looked at her and said calmly, "I'm tired. Don't touch me," it felt strange, foreign yet freeing. My voice didn't shake. It wasn't cold, just honest. For once, I reflected her words back, not to hurt her, but to acknowledge reality. The wall she built now had a mirror. She had been pushing me away, and I was finally refusing to be pushed. Change didn't happen overnight. At first she seemed puzzled, maybe even a little hurt. I saw her studying me across the room, trying to read a man she thought she understood. But I didn't waver. I invested in my son, in my work, in myself. I reconnected with old friends. Piece by piece, the man who had faded into the background came back into focus. And with every step forward, the weight I had carried for years began to lift. The atmosphere at home started to shift, not dramatically but quietly. The tension that once filled the air began to fade. Claire still had moments of coldness, but they no longer defined me. I wasn't waiting for her affection or approval anymore. I had reclaimed my self-respect, and that alone changed everything. One evening, weeks later, we sat in silence after dinner. The house was calm. I looked at her and said gently, "I need some space tonight." There was no anger, no bitterness, just honesty. She nodded. No surprise, no resentment, just acknowledgement. And in that small exchange I understood something profound. When you honor your boundaries, people are forced to see you differently. They may not change, but your presence commands recognition. The journey wasn't smooth. There were moments of longing, of remembering the warmth we once had. But I learned something powerful. I couldn't create love where it had faded. I could only choose how to treat myself. And that choice, though difficult, became freeing. I stopped measuring my worth by her reactions. I stopped shrinking to fit a version of love that no longer existed. Looking back, I see how much I silently endured, the rejection, the emotional absence, the slow erosion of connection. I used to think endurance was strength. Now I know true wisdom is knowing when to step back, when to protect your energy, and when to stop letting someone's indifference define your worth. We're still married, at least on paper. But everything's changed. I no longer give my love freely without reciprocation. My words, my presence, they come with boundaries now. And in that quiet clarity I've found peace. Not the peace of revenge, but of self-respect. Sometimes late at night I think about those early years, the laughter, the tenderness, the way we talked until sunrise. Those memories don't hurt anymore. They're gentle reminders of what once was, and what cannot be forced to return. Because love, real love, cannot be demanded. It can only grow where it's nurtured by two hearts willing to meet halfway. So now when I say, "I'm tired, don't touch me," it's not out of anger or bitterness. It's a declaration of dignity. A quiet reminder that my emotional well-being is not negotiable. It's not rejection, it's strength. And for the first time in years I feel whole again.